The trial ended 9 months ago. I was acquitted. I want you to understand that before anything else. The United Nations Joint Tribunal for Extraordinary Military Action convened for 14 weeks. 131 witnesses testified. 47 intelligence analysts reconstructed the timeline. 16 xenolinguists argued over 6 syllables in a transmission I had authorized the translation of in under 90 seconds. They acquitted me, unanimously, and I have not slept more than 3 consecutive hours since. My name is Commander Jonah Rask, formerly of the United Earth Defense Force, Frontier Division, Station Caldera. I was the ranking military officer at Outpost Vantage on the day the Kylori attacked it. I was the ranking military officer 41 hours later, when their homeworld ceased to exist. Between those 2 facts sits everything I am about to tell you. And I need you to understand I am not telling you this because I want forgiveness. I am telling you this because someone should know what it actually felt like inside the machine while it was running. The tribunal got the facts right. They got the timeline right. They got the chain of command, the authorization codes, the rules of engagement triggers, the legal architecture, all of it technically correct. What they did not get, what no tribunal can reconstruct from signal logs and after-action reports, is the texture of the hours. The way decisions that reshape star systems are made by people who haven't eaten in 19 hours and are still wearing the same uniform they bled in. The way moral clarity functions when you're standing over the bodies of people you trained, people you recruited. People whose spouses' names you know because you had dinner at their housing units and helped their kids with schoolwork. I'm not building a defense. The tribunal already built one for me, and it was structurally sound. I'm building a confession. They're not the same thing. Outpost Vantage was a 32-person deep space monitoring station orbiting a gas giant we designated KR-7714 at the trailing edge of the Orion Spur. It was not a military installation in any meaningful tactical sense. We had a defense suite of point defense turrets, a short-range EMP array, basic kinetic shielding, equipment that could fend off debris or a small pirate scout. The kind of armament that tells the galaxy, we're here, please don't bother us, but if you do, we can make it annoying. Our actual mission was gravitational cartography. KR-7714's magnetosphere created unusual lensing patterns that gave us a pristine read on mass signatures across 3 adjacent sectors. We mapped shipping lanes. We tracked comet nuclei. We flagged anomalies for follow-up by larger survey fleets. It was quiet, important, deeply boring work, and I had requested the posting after 11 years in combat theater because I wanted to stop watching people die. I had 32 people under my command. 23 were civilian scientists and technicians. 9 were military, myself, a small security detail, 2 communications officers, and a field medic. We ran 3 shifts. We ate together when scheduling allowed. Dr. Lena Voss ran the cartography lab and had a habit of singing old folk songs while calibrating the gravimetric arrays, slightly off-key, always the same 3 songs. Corporal Dae-Jung Park was 23 years old and had a letter from his girlfriend pinned inside his locker that he thought nobody knew about. Technician Asha Mehra had taught herself to cook with the limited supplies we had and turned Thursday dinners into something people genuinely looked forward to. She made a spice blend out of reconstituted garlic powder, synthetic paprika, and something she claimed was cumin, but I suspect was mislabeled turmeric. It was terrible. Everyone loved it. I'm telling you their names because in 48 hours most of them were dead, and the official record lists them as casualties sustained during the Caldera incident. That phrase does not contain their faces. It does not contain the sound Dae-Jung made, so I'll carry the faces and the sounds here, in this account, because someone should. We first detected the Kylori fleet at 0347 station time on what would become day 1. I was asleep. Communications Officer Reyes woke me with a tone I'd never heard her use. Not panicked, but locked. The voice people use when they've already processed something terrible and have clamped down on it to remain functional. Commander, CIC, now. I was in the Command Information Center in under 2 minutes. The main display showed KR-7714's orbital space, the familiar swirl of the gas giant's upper atmosphere, our station's blip, the scattered points of our sensor buoys, and cutting across the upper left quadrant, a formation of 12 vessels in a configuration our recognition database could not match. Unidentified. 12 contacts. They dropped out of superluminal travel 14 minutes ago at extreme sensor range, Reyes said. They're not broadcasting, no transponder. No identification on any registered frequency. I studied the formation, tight, disciplined, geometric in a way that suggested either automation or extraordinary training. They were moving at sublight speeds in a direct, unhesitating vector. Trajectory? Reyes paused for one beat. Us. I want to describe the feeling that produces because it's relevant to everything that came after. You are standing in your pajamas in a room with 6 screens and 2 people you trust, looking at 12 ships you've never seen before, heading directly for your position at a speed that will bring them into weapons range in approximately 6 hours. You are 32 people on a station designed to look at gravity. The nearest military asset capable of meaningful intervention, the UEDF Carthage Battle Group, is 11 hours away at emergency superluminal. You do the math immediately, not because you want to, but because your training does it for you involuntarily, like a reflex. 12 unknowns, 6 hours out. Help, 11 hours away. 5-hour gap. 5 hours during which whatever happens is yours alone to manage. Wake everyone, I said. Full station alert, spin up the defense suite, and get me a channel to CENTCOM. The channel to Central Command took 8 minutes to establish because of the relay distances involved. I spent those 8 minutes watching the formation approach and trying to build a framework for what I was seeing. Unknown species possible but unusual this deep into mapped space. Unregistered vessels concerning. No communication very concerning. Direct approach could be curiosity, could be distress, could be something else entirely. I held on to curiosity as long as I could. CENTCOM's response was Commander Elise Holt, Strategic Operations, patched through from the Jefferson Hub relay. She listened to my situation report without interrupting. When I finished, there was a 4-second lag that wasn't entirely signal delay. Vantage, we have no record of any species matching those vessel profiles in the Caldera sector. You are directed to attempt first contact on all standard frequencies. Simultaneously, UEDF Carthage is being scrambled. Estimated arrival 11 hours and 14 minutes from mark. You are authorized to defend the station under standard rules of engagement. Do not fire first. Confirm. Confirmed. Vantage will attempt contact and hold. Jonah. Her voice shifted out of protocol register. We had served together on the Meridian 7 years earlier. Keep your people close to the evacuation pods. Understood. I cut the channel and looked at Reyes. Broadcast on everything we have, every frequency, every language pack, every mathematical prime sequence, every universal constant we've got loaded. Tell them we're here, we're listening, and we'd like to talk. Reyes did. For 3 hours, she broadcast continuously. She sent prime number chains, she sent hydrogen emission line frequencies, she sent pi to 1,000 digits. She sent visual representations of our solar system, our biological profile, our station's technical specifications stripped of anything sensitive. She sent greetings in 41 human languages and 12 known alien diplomatic tongues. The 12 ships did not respond. They did not slow down. They did not alter course. At 0700, they entered visual range of our long-range optics, and I saw Kalori warships for the first time. They were beautiful. I need to say that because it's true, and because what they did 90 minutes later doesn't erase it. Kalori warships looked grown rather than built. Elongated, tapering hulls with a pearlescent sheen, like the inside of a nautilus shell stretched to 300 meters. No visible weapon ports in the conventional sense. The hulls were smooth, almost biological. The formation was perfect. Not the rigid geometry of automated drones, but the fluid precision of creatures that had trained together for so long that coordination had become instinct. Dr. Voss had come to the CIC unbidden. She stood beside me, staring at the optical feed, and said something I've never forgotten. Jonah, those ships are old. Look at the patterning on the forward hull. That's not manufacture wear, that's generational. Those vessels have been maintained for centuries. You don't maintain something for centuries unless you love it or you need it constantly. Either way, that's not an exploration fleet. She was right. I knew she was right. But I held onto the protocol because protocol was the only architecture I had. Continue broadcasting, I told Reyes. Add a standard territorial notification. We are a United Earth research station operating in unclaimed space under the Outer Frontier Accords. We request identification and intent. At 0722, we received our first and only communication from the Kalori fleet. It was a single transmission, 19 seconds long, in a language none of our systems could parse. No mathematical framework, no universal constants, no attempt at bridge communication, just a rapid, dense burst of phonemes that our xenolinguistics database could not match to any known species. I had our systems run every analytical framework we had: spectral analysis, syntax mapping, phoneme frequency distribution. All of it came back noise. Not because the language was random. Our linguists later confirmed it was highly structured, but because we had 0 reference points. No Rosetta Stone, no shared framework. I made a decision that the tribunal would later spend 4 days examining. I ordered a response broadcast in the clear, plain English on the frequency they had used. "We do not understand your language. We are not hostile. Please reduce speed and allow time for communication protocols to be established." What came back 11 minutes later was not a response. It was a targeting lock. 12 ships, 32 people. No ambiguity left. The first salvo hit our outer shielding array at 0741. The weapons were plasma-based, tightly focused, cycling at a rate that suggested the Kailori had put serious engineering into sustained bombardment. Our kinetic shields held for the first exchange. They were designed for micrometeorites, not coordinated military fire. But physics is physics, and energy dissipation doesn't care about intent. I had 7 minutes before the shields degraded past functionality. I used the first 2 ordering all non-essential personnel to evacuation pods. I used the next 2 authorizing our point defense systems to return fire. I used the remaining 3 trying to raise the Kalori fleet one more time. "This is Commander Jonah Rask of Outpost Vantage. You are firing on a civilian research station. We have non-combatants aboard. Ceasefire, ceasefire." The 4th salvo collapsed our primary shield generator. The 5th killed 11 people. It came through the hull in the habitation ring, the section where I had sent the civilians to prepare for evacuation. The plasma cut through the outer wall, vented the corridor to vacuum, and caught 7 scientists and 4 security personnel in a decompression event that lasted 9 seconds. I know it lasted 9 seconds because the station's internal sensors logged it with the same dispassionate precision they logged atmospheric composition and power cycling rates. 9 seconds, 11 names. Dae-Jung Park was in that corridor. He had been helping Dr. Mera seal an emergency bulkhead. The decompression caught them both against the inner frame. The log shows his suit integrity failed in under 2 seconds. Mera lasted 4. Neither time was enough for anything. I was in the CIC. I heard it happen through the internal comms, not the decompression itself, which is silent in vacuum, but the moments before. The shouting, the sound of the bulkhead seal failing. Dae-Jung saying something I couldn't make out. Then the channel going to static. You don't process that in real time. Your body processes it: heart rate, cortisol, adrenaline, the physical machinery of shock, but the conscious mind files it, sets it aside, builds a wall around it, and writes "do not open" until later on the outside, because you still have 21 people alive, and the next salvo is 18 seconds away. All remaining personnel, secondary evacuation corridor, now. Reyes, transmit everything. Full data dump to CENTCOM. The attack, the ship profiles, the transmission, all of it. Already transmitting. I looked at the tactical display. Our point defense turrets had scored hits on 2 Kalori vessels. The damage was cosmetic. Whatever those hulls were made of, our systems were not in the same engineering generation. Reyes, how long until Carthage arrives? 7 hours and 51 minutes. I want to stay in that number for a moment. 7 hours and 51 minutes. I want you to hold it in your mind. Because inside that gap between the moment I heard that number and the moment the Carthage battle group actually arrived, I made every decision that this confession is about. The Kailori did not destroy the station quickly. I have thought about this more than anything else. More than the retaliation. More than the tribunal. More than the faces. I have spent months trying to understand why 12 warships capable of reducing Outpost Vantage to vapor in a single coordinated volley instead chose to take it apart piece by piece over 4 hours. The tactical analysts at the tribunal called it systematic asset denial. They theorized the Kailori were documenting our technology, testing our response capabilities, cataloging our defenses before destroying each one in sequence. A military vivisection. I think it was simpler than that. I think they wanted us to see it happening. I think the drawn-out destruction was the message, and we were supposed to survive long enough to transmit it. If that was their intent, it worked. Over the next 4 hours, I lost my station in sections. The research labs went at 0800. The power grid went to backup at 0830. The secondary shield array, our last real protection, collapsed at 0900. The evacuation pods on the port side were hit at 0915, destroying 4 of our 6 escape vehicles with the people inside them. By 1000, I had 9 people alive, crowded into the inner core of the station, the most structurally reinforced section, originally designed as a storm shelter for solar events. We had emergency air, battery power, 2 remaining evacuation pods, and no weapons. The point defense turrets had been slagged 2 hours earlier. Dr. Voss was alive, Reyes was alive, 3 of my security detail, Kowalski, Ibarra, and Chen were alive, 4 technicians whose names were Rivera, Okafor, Brandt, and Yoon. 9 people, breathing recycled air in a room the size of a large apartment, listening to the Kalori take apart the rest of the station around us with the methodical patience of someone dismantling a clock. Reyes had maintained the data link to CENTCOM through a backup antenna that the Kalori hadn't targeted, probably because it was too small to register as a system worth destroying. Through that link, I had received confirmation that Carthage was inbound at emergency speed. I had received Commander Holt's assurance that the situation was being escalated to the highest levels of UEDF command. I had received authorization to use any means necessary to preserve the lives of my remaining personnel. That authorization, any means necessary. Those 3 words carried a legal payload that I understood in theory but had never had to unpack in practice. Under the frontier defense protocols established after the Cygnus incident, an outpost commander facing an unprovoked attack by an unidentified hostile force could, under specific conditions, authorize a distress escalation to Tier 4, which activated strategic-level assets far beyond the local theater. I had never triggered a Tier 4 escalation. No frontier commander had in 11 years. The reason was simple. Tier 4 assets included the Long Reach Initiative, Earth's deep strike capability, the weapons that could reach across light years and deliver civilization-ending force to a target that conventional fleets would take months to reach. I am telling you this now because I need you to understand that the option existed in my mind from the first hour. Not as a plan, not as an intention, as a shape, a dark geometric shape sitting in the back of my awareness, like a door in a wall that you know is there, but have never opened and cannot imagine opening. At 10:30, the Kalori stopped firing. The silence was worse. For 40 minutes, the 12 ships held position around the wreckage of my station and did nothing. No communication, no scans that we could detect. They simply sat there, surrounding us, while we breathed our diminishing air and waited. Voss was the one who figured out why. "They're waiting for the response," she said. "They hit us knowing we'd call for help. They want to see what comes." "That's insane," Kowalski said. "They can't know what we'd send." "They don't need to know specifics. They need to know capability. Response time, force composition, vector of approach." Voss looked at me. "Jonah, they're using us as bait. This isn't an attack. It's a probe." I felt something shift in my chest. Not the fear I'd been managing for 5 hours. I'd made peace with fear, or at least caged it. This was different, colder. The understanding that my people hadn't just been killed in an attack. They'd been killed as a stimulus, an input designed to generate a measurable output. 11 dead as a data collection method. Daejung Park, dead at 23 because someone wanted to see how fast our ships could arrive. The fury was immediate and absolute, and I contained it because containing things was what I had been trained to do. But I need you to know it was there. Not righteous anger, not noble wrath, fury, the kind that doesn't care about proportion or justice or consequence, the kind that wants to hurt something back, specifically and precisely, in a way that can never be undone. I contained it, for now. At 11:15, the Kalori fleet began moving again, not toward us, outward. They formed up in the same perfect geometric pattern they'd arrived in, and began accelerating away from KR 7714 on a heading that our navigation systems could track. Reyes plotted the vector. It led deeper into unexplored space toward a star system our long-range surveys had cataloged but never visited, a system with one habitable world. "They're going home," Reyes said quietly. I watched them leave. 12 ships, pulling away with the unhurried confidence of predators who had finished with a carcass and saw no reason to linger. They did not look back. They did not send a final transmission. They simply left. And then I made my first real decision. Reyes, open a Tier 3 tactical channel to Carthage. Full sensor data, attack profile, vessel signatures, departure vector, everything. Tier 3, Commander. 3, not 4. She looked at me for a moment. She knew what Tier 4 was. She knew I hadn't triggered it. She nodded and began transmitting. 3, not 4. I want credit for that. I want it noted that in the immediate aftermath, with 11 dead and the fury still screaming in my blood, I chose 3. I chose the conventional response. I chose the version that meant warships and diplomats and measured proportionate engagement. I chose 3. What happened next is why I didn't stay there. The UEDF Carthage battle group arrived at 1547. 3 heavy cruisers, 2 destroyer escorts, and a fleet carrier. Rear Admiral Suki Yamazaki commanding. I had served under Yamazaki once, briefly. She was competent, apolitical, and deeply practical in the way that good military commanders are. She treated every problem as a system to be understood before it was engaged. She sent a medical shuttle immediately. We were evacuated from the station court, 9 survivors out of 32, and brought aboard the cruiser Nagasaki. I remember the medic who processed me looked at my uniform and then at my face and asked if the blood was mine. Most of it wasn't. Yamazaki debriefed me personally within an hour of my arrival. I gave her everything: the approach, the silence, the single unintelligible transmission, the escalating attack, the systematic destruction pattern, Voss's assessment that the attack was a probe. She listened with the same locked-down attentiveness Reyes had shown 14 hours earlier. When I finished, she was quiet for 10 seconds. Commander Rask, we tracked the departing fleet on long-range sensors during our approach. They executed a superluminal jump approximately 2 hours after leaving your station. We have their exit vector. Toward the habitable world. Confirmed. We've designated it Kalori Prime pending formal classification. She paused. CENTCOM has ordered the Carthage group to pursue and establish a defensive perimeter while diplomatic channels are explored. Diplomatic channels, with a species that had not said a single comprehensible word before killing 11 of my people. I kept my expression professional. There's more, Yamazaki said. During your evacuation, Carthage sensors conducted a full sweep of the Caldera sector. We found something at the outer system boundary. She brought up a holographic display. I saw debris. Not the metallic, angular debris of a destroyed ship, but something organic. Curved fragments of something pearlescent. Familiar. That's Kalori hull material, I said. Yes, and this. She zoomed in. Among the ship fragments were other objects. Smaller. Irregular. I didn't understand what I was looking at for several seconds. And then I did. They were pieces of other stations, not human stations. The architectural styles were varied, some crystalline, some metallic, some composite. At least 4 distinct construction methodologies, at least 4 different species. We've counted debris consistent with at least 6 separate structures, Yamazaki said. None of them match any known civilization in our database. All of them show plasma damage signatures consistent with the weapons used on Vantage. 6 stations, 6 species, maybe more, all destroyed. All out here on the frontier where nobody was watching. How old is the debris? I asked. Variable. The oldest fragments are approximately 90 years degraded. The most recent, she looked at me, are less than a year old. They had done this before. Not once. Many times. Over nearly a century. Find a station, destroy it, study the response, leave. The Kalori weren't probing human defenses. They were conducting a long-term systematic survey of every spacefaring civilization within reach. Cataloging capabilities, measuring response times, building a database of galactic military architecture one atrocity at a time, and every species they'd tested was either too weak to respond, too slow to catch them, or too dead to try. Has CENTCOM seen this? I asked. They're seeing it now. The fury I had contained for 14 hours began pressing against its walls. Within 6 hours, the political landscape shifted in ways I could track even from a cruiser's guest quarters. Yamazaki gave me access to the strategic communication feed, a courtesy extended to the ranking survivor of the attack. Through it, I watched the machine begin to turn. The debris field analysis went to CENTCOM. CENTCOM sent it to the Joint Chiefs. The Joint Chiefs sent it to the civilian government. Within 4 hours, the Secretary General's office had been briefed. Within 5, the Security Council had convened an emergency session. The Kalori were not a first contact situation. They were a serial predator with a century-long operational history. I watched the assessments come in from the intelligence analysts. Each one was worse than the last. Estimated Kalori fleet size based on sensor data. Not 12 ships, but potentially hundreds. Defensive capability based on hull composition analysis. Significantly beyond current human military technology. Strategic assessment. The Kalori had now tested human response time and knew exactly how long the gap between distress signal and military arrival was for frontier installations. Every human outpost on the frontier was now operating inside that gap, and the Kalori knew exactly how wide it was. At 2200, 8 hours after our rescue, a second Kalori fleet was detected entering the Caldera sector. Not 12 ships, 41. They were heading for Outpost Meridian, a 200-person research colony 3 systems away. I was in Yamazaki's CIC when the second fleet detection came in. The room went cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. 41 warships, moving at the same deliberate pace, on a direct heading for a civilian installation 10 times the size of Vantage. Yamazaki's face did not change. She was already doing the math. Time to intercept if we divert now? 14 hours, Admiral. They'll reach Meridian in 9. 5-hour gap. The same 5-hour gap. They had measured it at Vantage and they were using it. Alert Meridian. Full evacuation. Get everyone onto anything that moves. Admiral, Meridian's evacuation capacity covers approximately 60% of its population. The remainder, I know the math, Lieutenant. She turned to me. Not as a courtesy, as a calculation. I was the ranking officer who had survived first contact with Kalori weapons, and she needed the information in my head. Commander Rask, in your assessment, is there any possibility this is a demonstration, a show of force intended to compel negotiation? I thought about the 9 seconds, the systematic dismantling, the debris field of 6 civilizations. No. Is there any possibility of meaningful communication with the approaching fleet? We tried for 3 hours. They responded with a targeting lock. Is there, in your professional judgment, any conventional military response available to the Carthage battle group that can reach Meridian in time to prevent mass casualties? I looked at the display. 41 ships. Their weapons had treated our shields like paper. Our point defense had barely scratched their hulls. 3 heavy cruisers, 2 destroyers, and a carrier against 41 vessels of confirmed superior capability, and we couldn't even get there before the killing started. No, Admiral. Yamazaki nodded. She already knew. She'd needed me to say it for the record. Commander Rask, under Frontier Defense Protocol 7, as the ranking survivor of the initial attack event, you have co-authorization capability for strategic escalation. She paused. I am requesting that you join me in co-authorizing a Tier 4 escalation to CENTCOM. There it was, the door in the wall. I need to stop here and explain what Tier 4 actually meant in operational terms, because the public understanding of the Long Reach Initiative is built on euphemism and abstraction. And abstraction is how you get a commander to push a button. The Long Reach Initiative was developed 30 years ago as Earth's existential insurance policy. The principle was simple. If a threat to human survival was identified at interstellar distances, humanity needed the ability to neutralize it without waiting for conventional fleets to cross the gap. The technology combined targeted gravitational manipulation with directed energy delivery across superluminal conduits. In plain language, we could reach out across light years and deliver catastrophic force to a planetary body within hours, regardless of distance. The targeting wasn't surgical. It wasn't designed to be. Long Reach was a deterrent, a weapon so disproportionate that its mere existence was supposed to prevent the scenarios that would require its use. You don't build a scalpel to prevent war. You build a hammer so large that no one wants to test whether you'll swing it. The yield of a long-reach strike on a habitable world was total biosphere collapse. Not immediate vaporization. The physics didn't work that way. Instead, the gravitational disruption would destabilize the planet's core over a period of approximately 72 hours, triggering cascading tectonic and atmospheric events that would render the surface uninhabitable. Everything on that world, every city, every forest, every ocean, every creature that had ever lived there would be gone within 3 days. That's what Tier 4 meant. That's what Yamazaki was asking me to co-authorize. I said yes. Not immediately, not easily, but faster than I want to admit. The process was not a single button. It was a chain. Yamazaki and I submitted the co-authorization request to CENTCOM, which forwarded it to the Joint Chiefs with our tactical assessment attached. The Joint Chiefs had 45 minutes to review. The Security Council had 30. The Secretary General had final authority. During those 75 minutes, the second Kalori fleet closed another 1.2 million kilometers toward Meridian. Meridian began its partial evacuation. 60% capacity meant 120 people could leave. 80 could not. 80 people sitting in a station made of the same materials as Vantage, watching the same kind of fleet approach at the same unhurried pace. I spent those 75 minutes in the quarters Yamazaki had assigned me, sitting on the edge of the bunk, staring at the wall. I was not making a decision. The decision was made. I was waiting to find out if the people above me would make the same one. What I was actually doing, what my mind was actually processing, was trying to hold two things simultaneously. The first was the debris field. 6 civilizations, 90 years, an industrial process of predation with no negotiation, no communication, no mercy. A species that treated sapient life as a variable to be measured and then eliminated. The second was a planet I had never seen, full of living things I had never met, that had built those beautiful ships and raised children and developed art and language, and had an entire world of experience that I could not fathom and that would end if the chain completed. I held both. I could not reconcile them. I was not asked to. At 23:47, the Secretary General authorized Tier 4. At 23:51, CENTCOM transmitted the long-reach targeting package. At 23:58, the gravitational disruption sequence initiated against the planet. Our database is now designated Kalori Prime. I was not in the room when it happened. There was no room. It was automated. A signal left a facility on the far side of human space, propagated through a superluminal conduit, and reached a world I had never visited. The disruption began in the planet's core and would take 72 hours to complete. I sat on my bunk and felt the seconds pass and tried to understand what I had just been part of. Yamazaki called me to the CIC at 0015. Her voice was unchanged, professional, locked. "Commander, the second Kalori fleet has stopped." I came to the CIC. The display showed the 41 ships, frozen in space, no longer advancing toward Meridian. They held position for 11 minutes. Then, in unison, they turned. They went home. All of them. Every Kalori vessel our sensors could detect across the entire Caldera sector, the 41 heading for Meridian. The 12 that had destroyed Vantage, 7 others we hadn't even known were there. All of them turned and burned for Kalori Prime at maximum speed. They knew. Somehow, through whatever communication technology they possessed, they knew what was happening to their world, and they abandoned everything to go back to it. I watched 67 ships race toward a planet that was already dying, and I understood with perfect annihilating clarity that I was watching parents run toward a burning house. The long-reach strike could not be recalled. This was by design. The architects of the system had built irreversibility into its core because a deterrent that can be undone is not a deterrent. Once the gravitational disruption sequence initiated, it propagated through the planet's structure autonomously. There was no off switch. There was no negotiation window. There was only physics. I know this because I asked. 14 minutes after watching the Kalori fleet reverse course, I went to Yamazaki and asked if the strike could be stopped. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, something between sympathy and exhaustion, and said, "No, you know it can't." They stopped. The fleet stopped. They're going home. They're going home because their world is dying, Commander. That is the intended effect. The intended effect was deterrence. They've been deterred. They're retreating. If we could... Jonah. She used my first name. It's done. It was done. And for the next 72 hours, I had access to the strategic feed, and I could not stop watching. Our long-range sensors and the network of deep space observatories that CENTCOM tasked to the event gave us a surprisingly detailed picture of what happened to Calori Prime. I wish they hadn't. Hour 6. The first tectonic events. The planet's crust began to fracture along its major fault lines. From orbit, the cracks would have been visible as lines of magma splitting across continents. The Calori fleet had not yet arrived home. They were still in transit, racing toward a world that was already breaking apart. Hour 14. Atmospheric destabilization. The volcanic activity from the tectonic fractures pumped enough particulate matter into the atmosphere to trigger rapid thermal disruption. The planet's weather systems began to collapse. Firestorms, megacyclones, the kind of atmospheric events that strip continents. Hour 19. The Calori fleet arrived at their homeworld. 67 ships in orbit around a planet that was tearing itself apart. Our sensors showed them holding formation, circling the world in that same perfect geometric pattern they'd maintained during the attack on Vantage. They didn't leave, they didn't scatter. They stayed in orbit around their dying world, and our analysts reported what appeared to be massive shuttle activity between the ships and the surface. They were evacuating. With 67 warships, they were trying to pull their people off a planet that was coming apart beneath them. Hour 26. The first ship broke formation. Then another. Ships began descending into the atmosphere itself into conditions that would destroy them. Apparently attempting to reach population centers that surface shuttles could no longer access. We watched warships designed for interstellar combat dive into a disintegrating atmosphere and not come back up. They were trying to save their children. I watched this from a screen on a cruiser, and I want to tell you that I felt nothing, that the operational logic was clean and I stood behind it. But this is a confession, not a defense. I stood in the observation room of the Nagasaki and watched the species die in real time, and what I felt was not guilt, not yet. What I felt was recognition. The same desperate, irrational, sacrificial frenzy I would expect from any human fleet if Earth were dying. The same willingness to fly into fire. The same refusal to leave. Dr. Voss found me at hour 30. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood beside me and watched the same feed. "They have children," she said. "I know. They have cities. Look, you can see the light patterns on the night side. Those are cities, Jonah. Millions of lights." "I know. What did we do?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because every answer I could construct was a justification, and justifications are not answers. Justifications are walls you build so you don't have to look at the thing directly. Hour 41. The planet's magnetic field collapsed. Without the magnetic field, the solar wind began stripping the atmosphere directly. The remaining Calori ships in orbit, 39 of the original 67. The others had been lost in atmospheric descent, pulled back to high orbit. They had nowhere to go. They had no other homeworld that we knew of. They sat in orbit and watched. Hour 58. The oceans began to boil. Not metaphorically. The combination of atmospheric loss, tectonic heat, and solar radiation drove the surface water temperature past sustainability. The planet's biosphere, already devastated, entered terminal collapse. Hour 72. Calori Prime was uninhabitable. The surface was a molten, irradiated wasteland scoured by solar wind. The atmosphere was functionally gone. The oceans were vapor. Everything that had lived on that world, every animal, every plant, every microorganism, every city, every library, every piece of music, every memory stored in whatever form the Calori stored their memories, was erased. The 39 surviving ships remained in orbit for 6 more hours. Then they left. Our sensors tracked them moving deeper into unexplored space, away from human territory, away from everything. They have not been detected since. Outpost Meridian was saved. 200 people, alive because the Calori fleet turned around. 8 other frontier installations that we later learned were on approach vectors from Calori scouting groups, all of them untouched because every Calori ship in the sector broke off and went home. The final casualty count on the human side, 23 dead at Outpost Vantage. The estimated population of Calori Prime, based on post-event analysis of city light patterns, atmospheric composition indicating industrial civilization, and the scale of shuttle evacuation activity, between 800 million and 1.2 billion, 23 human lives, approximately 1 billion calorie lives. That is the ratio. That is the number I carry. The tribunal examined this ratio extensively. My defense presented the following argument. The Kalori had demonstrated a pattern of systematic, unprovoked destruction of sapient civilizations over a 90-year period. At least 6 species had been targeted before humanity. The escalation from 12 ships to 41 ships in a matter of hours demonstrated an immediate intent to accelerate hostilities. The gap between distress signal and military response meant that conventional defense was structurally impossible. Hundreds of frontier personnel across multiple installations were in imminent, inescapable danger. The long-reach strike was the only available mechanism to halt the attack in time. The prosecution there was a prosecution because the tribunal took its role seriously argued that the single unintelligible transmission might have been a warning, that the 19 seconds of Kalori language we couldn't translate might have contained information that would have changed everything, that we responded to a species we couldn't understand by destroying them. The xenolinguists eventually decoded the transmission. It took 7 months and the combined efforts of 4 university departments and a dedicated AI language model. When they finally translated the 19 seconds of Kalori speech, they found that it contained the following. This territory is claimed. Leave or be removed. You have been assessed. You are not sufficient. Not a warning. A verdict. They had already decided we were too weak to matter, and the attack was the execution of that decision. The analysts confirmed that not sufficient appeared to be a categorical designation the Kalori applied to species they deemed below a threshold of threats, species that could be destroyed without consequence. They had assessed 6 civilizations the same way. 6 civilizations that no longer existed. We were meant to be the 7th. The tribunal ruled that the response was legally justified under the existential threat doctrine. Proportionality, they argued, was not calculable against a threat that operated on civilizational timescales. You do not weigh 23 lives against 1 billion. You weigh the survival of every species the Kalori would have destroyed next against the cost of stopping them permanently. By that calculus, the numbers favored the strike. I sat in that courtroom and listened to intelligent, moral people construct a framework in which what we did made sense, and every word of it was logically sound, and none of it touched the thing that actually lived inside me. This is the part that doesn't fit into tribunal transcripts. After the strike, after the rescue, after the long trip back to Earth, I was given leave. Medical leave, technically. The psychologists cleared me for duty after 6 weeks. Which tells you something about either the quality of their assessment tools or the quality of my performance during assessment. I was acting. I was saying the words that meant functional and processing and integrating the experience into a healthy framework. I had spent 20 years in the military. I knew what the checkboxes looked like. What I was actually doing during those 6 weeks was sitting in my apartment in Geneva and watching the Kalori footage on repeat. Not the attack on Vantage. I didn't need to watch that. That was in my body, the sounds, the decompression, Dae-jung's voice cutting out. I couldn't forget it if I wanted to. What I watched was the evacuation, hour 19 through hour 41, the Kalori fleet arriving at their homeworld and trying to save their people. I watched it over and over, focusing on different ships each time, tracking their movements, trying to understand the patterns. There was one ship smaller than the warships, probably a support vessel, that made 17 separate descents into the atmosphere. 17 trips into conditions that were destroying the larger warships in single passes. Each time it went down, it came back up slower, more damaged, trailing debris. On the 18th descent, it didn't come back. 17 trips. I don't know how many people, how many Kalori that ship pulled off the surface. I don't know if the pilot was military or civilian or something the Kalori didn't distinguish between. I don't know if they had a family. I don't know if they were afraid. I know they went down 18 times, and that was the kind of courage I was trained to recognize and honor, and I helped create the conditions that required it. There was a moment during the tribunal that I've never spoken about publicly. The prosecution called a xenoanthropologist named Dr. Yuki Tanaka. She had spent 5 months analyzing the wreckage and debris from the Kalori surface using long-range spectral imaging. The planet was too irradiated for direct survey. She presented her findings about Kalori civilization based on what could be reconstructed from orbital data. They had cities arranged in spiral patterns consistent with communal, rather than hierarchical, social organization. They had agricultural systems that suggested sustainable farming practices maintained over centuries. They had what appeared to be large communal structures, not military, not industrial, that Dr. Tanaka's team theorized were cultural centers. Libraries, perhaps, theaters, places where 1 billion people stored what they knew and what they imagined, all gone. Every spiral city, every library, every field. She also presented evidence that the Kylori were not a unified civilization. The fleet that attacked Vantage and the ships that attempted the evacuation showed different hull markings, different configurations, different apparent ages. Her conclusion, which she offered with appropriate academic caution, was that the Kylori military may have been a distinct caste or faction within a larger society, and that the civilizational decision to conduct predatory surveys of neighboring species may not have been a civilizational decision at all. The warships and the farming communities may not have agreed on anything. We killed them all equally. The tribunal noted Dr. Tanaka's testimony and ruled that the information, while significant, could not have been known at the time of the decision and therefore did not bear on the legality of the authorization. They were right. It didn't bear on the legality. It bore on something else entirely, something that legal frameworks are not built to hold. I live alone now. I resigned my commission after the trial. The UEDF offered me a promotion survivor of the Caldera incident, co-authorizer of the strike that ended the Kylori threat, hero of the frontier. I declined. They were confused by this. A commander who authorizes an action and is vindicated by a tribunal should stand behind the action. My refusal to accept the promotion was interpreted by some as doubt, by others as modesty, by a few as cowardice. It was none of those things. It was simply that I could not wear the uniform and be the person who watched the footage simultaneously, and I had chosen the footage. I live in a coastal town in Norway. I chose it because the winters are long and dark, and the sea makes a sound at night that fills the silence without requiring me to participate in it. I don't sleep well. I told you that at the beginning. 3 hours at a stretch, sometimes less. The dreams are not dramatic. I don't dream about the attack, about decompression, about fire. I dream about the small ship making its 18th descent. Every time in the dream it comes back up. It clears the atmosphere, damaged, slow, trailing smoke, but it makes it. In the dream, it survives. Then I wake up and the sea is making its sound and I lie in the dark and remember that it didn't. People contact me sometimes, journalists mostly, looking for a retrospective quote on the anniversary. Veterans organizations that want me to speak at events. Once a screenwriter who wanted to adapt the Caldera incident into a film and assured me it would be respectful and nuanced. I declined all of them, but 6 months ago someone contacted me who I did not decline. The message came through an anonymized relay, which was unusual. The text was in English, grammatically perfect but with syntax patterns that our linguistic analysis tools flagged as non-native, not non-native as in learned English as a second language, but non-native as in learned English from signal intercepts without ever speaking to a human. It read, Commander Rask, we have translated your tribunal testimony. We have translated Dr. Tanaka's analysis. We survived. Not all, not enough, but some. We know what you carry. We carry corresponding weight. This is not forgiveness. We are not capable of that yet, and you may not be capable of receiving it. This is acknowledgement. You ended what our military began and could not stop on our own. The spiral cities did not choose. You did not know. These facts coexist and do not resolve. We contact you because the silence between us is more dangerous than speech, and we have learned what silence costs. We will monitor this channel. If your species wishes to speak, we will attempt to listen. We have practice now at doing difficult things. I sat with that message for 3 days. Then I forwarded it to the Secretary General's office with a single annotation. They survived. They're ready. I am not the right person for what comes next, but what comes next should come. I am not a hero. The tribunal's verdict does not make me one. The 200 people at Meridian who are alive because the Kylori turned around do not make me one. The absence of a 7th, 8th, 9th dead civilization does not make me one. I am a person who was placed inside a machine at the worst possible moment and operated the levers in front of me because the machine was designed to be operated and the moment demanded it. Everything I did was rational. Everything I did was authorized. Everything I did was, by the assessment of every legal and military body that examined it, correct. I destroyed a world. Not a military installation, not a fleet. A world. With spiral cities and communal farms and libraries full of things I'll never know. With children who had never seen a human, never heard of Earth, never done anything to anyone. With a pilot who went down 18 times. I carry this. Not as punishment. I don't believe in punishment as a productive framework. Not as guilt implies I believe I should have done differently. And when I reconstruct the decision with the information I had, I arrive at the same place every time. I carry it as weight, as the simple, irreducible mass of what it means to make a choice that is simultaneously correct and monstrous. A choice that any moral person should have made, and that no moral person can make without being changed by it. The galaxy knows what humanity did. Every spacefaring civilization within signal range has seen the data. They know we are the species that answered an attack on 32 people by annihilating 1 billion. They know our logic was sound. They know our legal framework held. They know the Kalori were predators who had destroyed 6 civilizations without consequence, and they know every single one of them knows that we are capable of this, that the capability exists and has been used and the user was acquitted. I understand that this is, in strategic terms, the most effective deterrent humanity has ever possessed. No species will test our frontier installations again. The cost has been demonstrated. The mathematics are public. The lesson is permanent. I understand that this is, in human terms, is something we can never put down. The Kalori message sits in a diplomatic queue now. People far more qualified than me are constructing frameworks for communication. Xenolinguists are building shared language protocols. Diplomats are drafting preliminary position papers. Psychologists who specialize in interspecies trauma are consulting on approach vectors. Somewhere in deep space, 39 ships carry what remains of a civilization that once had spiral cities, and they are waiting to hear if we want to talk. I hope we do. Not because I believe in redemption. I don't think this is redeemable, and I don't think it should be. The impulse to redeem is the impulse to close the wound, and some wounds should stay open because the pain is information. It tells you what you're capable of. It tells you what the machine can do when you operate the levers. I hope we talk because the silence is where the next war lives, and I have had enough of war. Dae-Jung Park was 23. He had a letter in his locker. Asha Mehra made spice blends from mislabeled turmeric. Dr. Lena Voss sang off-key while calibrating instruments, and she survived. And the last time I spoke to her, she told me she couldn't sing anymore. Not those songs, not any songs. And the look on her face was not grief, but something past grief, something that didn't have a word yet in any language I know. 23 people died at Vantage. 1 billion died on Kalori Prime. Those numbers are not comparable. They exist on different scales, in different moral categories, separated by a gulf that no framework bridges. I carry all of them. I was acquitted. I do not sleep. The sea makes its sound, and the small ship goes down for the 18th time, and in the morning there is light on the water, and I go on, because going on is the last operational directive I have, and I have always followed my orders, even the ones I gave myself. Recording ends. Commander Jonah Rask's testimony was archived by the United Nations Office of Interstellar Historical Record on March 14, 2349. The Kalori contact protocols were formally ratified 7 months later. The first direct communication session between human and Kalori representatives took place on the anniversary of the strike, at Commander Rask's suggestion. He did not attend. The pilot of the small evacuation vessel was later identified through Kalori records as Soravine, a civilian cargo runner with no military rank. Soravine successfully evacuated approximately 4,000 people during 17 atmospheric descents before the 18th descent ended contact. 4,000. The UEDF Long Reach Initiative remains operational. It has not been used since.